World Intellectual Property Day is a great opportunity to celebrate the power of innovation and creativity and to explore how intellectual property supports our drive to build a better future. In 2023, the theme for World Intellectual Property Day is Women and Intellectual Property, Accelerating Innovation and Creativity. Now, let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by Amanda Lotheringen, a Senior Manager, Copyright and IP Enforcement Companies and Intellectual Property Commission. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Amanda. And now, let's start here, perhaps. What do intellectual property rights mean and what types of IP currently exist?
So intellectual property, Unati, means many things to many different people. So there's specific rights that you get through legislation, and we can have a lengthy discussion about that. But in essence, it talks about patents, trademarks, copyright, designs, and all of these types of intellectual property is registered at the CIPC, the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission. So it's the power of the mind, or the creations of the mind, to put it simply, that reverts into intellectual property rights.
All right, now let's focus on this year's theme, women and intellectual property. How significant a role have women played in this space, which is sadly still male-dominated, but a lot of people simply don't realize just how many women have actually played a key role in invention as well as innovation.
Yeah, you're quite right. But studies have been done to look at the specific role that women plays in innovation and looked at how many patents has been registered internationally. WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, has done a very detailed study that's available on their website. But if I can talk about how in many parts of the world, women has not been treated equal under the law. So from owning land to obtaining inheritance, women are usually at a disadvantage. But stronger intellectual property protection helps alleviate this discrepancy. So when IP rights are strongly protected, the rights of women are also protected. For example, the countries of the strongest protection in copyright also tend to have the highest paid actresses and female artists.
All right, let's start talking then about, those rights and, what actually is is capable to be there for, just enforcing these rights. For instance, when is the best time then for an individual to protect their IP, when they start their invention or this innovation or creativity?
Okay, actually from the word go. When you start drafting your song and you write it down, make sure that you make detailed notes about the process of thought that you go through. That's also relevant to writing down the process that when you are designing a software program, for instance, or writing a novel or a book. So all of that steps in protection is very important to prove your copyright. In South Africa, we don't register copyright. It's a natural right that you obtain because you're the author of that creative work or the creator of that work. We do, however, register patents, which is an intricate process for registration, but the CIPC has got an inventor assistance program that can definitely help you to progress in your patent registration area. Trademarks, we all know the well-known trademarks. It's the brands that we wear. It's the things that we use to identify the value of our processes that we utilize and the goods that we use. We understand and we trust a certain brand. So trademarks are also registered in South Africa and protected for 10 years. Unati, you mentioned the enforcement of these rights. Once you've got the registration papers from the CIPC, you have a remedy available in our Counterfeit Goods Act. And we have a team of law enforcement parties and departments that protect your IP rights. We help you to combat the unauthorized use of your trademark through various processes. The listeners would remember or think about the counterfeit goods in our marketplaces. And that's where we play a very active role to make sure that these goods are confiscated and removed so it doesn't harm the consumers.
Let's stay with enforcement, particularly outside of our borders. What happens if, the person who infringes, say, my intellectual property rights is based overseas? How would you then tackle that problem?
Good question. So this is also where the World Intellectual Property Organization play a very intricate part. We have international collaboration committees where you then have counterparts in other countries. So say, for instance, the person that's contravening your right is doing it from China or Pakistan or any other country that is a member of WIPO. We have counterparts in those areas that will then assist in protection. But it is important to remember that if your rights are not registered in that specific country, it cannot be protected. So trademarks are territorial. They're only protected in the country in which you register them. But to make sure that it is protected, WIPO has got an international system of protection. So once you've registered locally, you can also then register through WIPO's websites.
And while we're talking about, just those international standards, and you mentioned earlier, patent items, the COVID-19 pandemic and the TRIPS, non-waiver outcome highlighted, just the need for domestic intellectual property law reform. Just talk to us about, how this could be then treated going forward.
Okay, this is a very politically driven question, so I'm going to tread carefully because it also relates to access to knowledge, access to medicines. And yes, we have a very strong patent or intellectual property regime in South Africa. It's been tested in many of our high courts, but access to relevant medicines in a situation like a pandemic is very important. So I think we are busy looking at our legislation. Our patent bill is before Parliament. It should be signed by our president soon, but the implementation of this legislation is more important than to just get the legislation in place. And that's what we're busy with today here in KwaZulu-Natal in Verulam. We are educating and creating awareness about the value of intellectual property in all spaces, and from the patent development innovation part right through to creativity that's protected through our Copyright Act. And this is also the reason why we are celebrating World Intellectual Property Day in South Africa, and we're celebrating all over the country by virtual engagements as well as these physical engagements that's happening all over the country. And it's to make sure that the citizens of South Africa understand the value that's locked up in intellectual property. Not only in the legislative framework, but also in the implementation.
I would imagine, Amanda, this, speaks across the year, not just education around World Intellectual Property Day, but it's something that your body does on a continuous basis because it is a very tricky conversation and understanding of the law, particularly.
Yeah, you're quite right, Unati. We do a lot of education and awareness right throughout the year. On our website and on our partners' websites, there's webinars that you can listen to afterwards. You can type in the relevant information you need. But it is what we are trying to do is move away from the legal language to embrace the simple language of English so that we can communicate the value of IP and the benefits locked up in IP, especially for women and SMMEs. I just need to talk a little bit more about the value of women that utilizes IP. We have found that when you empower women in the IP space, you definitely see direct correlation to economic growth.
Amanda, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Amanda Lotheringen, Senior Manager for Copyright and IP Enforcement Companies and Intellectual Property Commission.